friends, and welcome to a very, very lazy Saturday morning. I'm not even sure if it's still morning, to be honest. It's been that lazy. I thought though this week we could do a bit of a reading vlog, like hang out with me, what I do this week, and read a lot. So this morning I spent a good hour or so in bed reading How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell. This was the April Blossom Book Club book, a book club I host over on my Discord. And I had read half of it by the end of the month, but I clearly hadn't finished it, and I really want to because I am really enjoying it. I am also reading May's book club book, which is Queering the Tarot by Cassandra, so we'll be reading a little bit of that just so I can kind of keep up to date with the conversation that's going on in the Discord. But obviously being a vlog, that also means we will be getting up to other things, and today on the agenda is a walk to Yarraville because I need to go to the Sun bookshop. It's a wonderful little bookshop and they are saving my ass because it's Mother's Day tomorrow, and I have already given Mum one present, but I'd intended to give her another present so she had something to open on Mother's Day, but because of the whole virus thing and postage problems, it has not arrived. So late last night, I'm talking very late, I put in like an emergency order for a book for Mum for tomorrow, so at least I have something to give her. So I'm going to go pick that up this afternoon. To change because I got soaked through. It's about a 40-minute walk to the bookshop, and it's normally a lovely walk unless you get caught in the rain because you didn't check the weather app before you head out and you live in Melbourne. And now that I'm home, the rain has stopped, although it's still very overcast, which is why it's so dark. But success, we did get Mum's book for Mother's Day tomorrow. Isn't this just cute? I love that they wrapped this up. I did put in my notes that it was for Mother's Day. So I love that they wrapped it up in this lovely paper. And then this postcard. You could have panic bought Lou Roll, but you supported the Sun bookshop instead. I love it. I think that's really sweet. So that will be her present. But for now that I'm warming up again and in some dry clothes, I'm gonna sit down and just get to some reading. Apologies for the lighting. It is just about to turn midnight and I have just finished How to Do Nothing. I have just kind of quickly rated on GoodReads. I've given this a 4 stars out of 5. Right now I'm ready for bed, so I think I will tell you more about this book tomorrow. I'll see you in the morning. Such a beautiful day. Could not decide on my next book. I'll have a bit of a think on it, I suppose, but for now I'm just going to read a little bit more of this month's Blossom Book Club book, which is Queering the Tarot. I've got my pen ready for taking some notes because I have had some thoughts and feelings which I might share with you. Maybe I'll do a review of this one. Our pancakes were super yummy and I've got a cup of tea, and now I'm gonna cozy on up on our couch and read for a bit.
Want to follow somebody who has a Patreon, follow somebody who has a Patreon. If you don't want to, then don't, right? Everybody has to navigate their own online world, both what they're putting out and what they are putting into their feed.
So it is mid-afternoon and I have sort of been reading. I read maybe 10 pages of Queering the Tarot, but I ended up kind of watching like a good hour of Kelly from The Truth and Story was doing a live stream, and I never catch her live streams because they're usually like 5 a.m. my time, but not today. And she was doing a response to the negativity discussion that has been going around that I did a video of. So I was very curious to hear what she had to say. It was great. Thanks, Kelly. Right now we are heading off to go see Mum for Mother's Day, drop off her present, say hi, see the dogs. I'm really excited. Hi Dad, love you.
Hi Katie.
Good evening, friends. It is Sunday evening, but the wrong Sunday evening. Last I left you, it was a full week ago. I kind of had a bit of trouble getting in the flow for reading this week, and so I didn't really vlog, and also I was super busy making my new video trailer for my channel, which I don't want to tell you how many hours I put into that 1 minute video. I was still kind of keeping up with Querying the Tarot, so I am now on page 74, so I think like not quite halfway through, but I am up to the wands, so I've gotten all the way through the major arcana. So I've been reading kind of like a page or two or a couple of pages a day. There's a lot I like about it, a lot that I suppose I'm not quite satisfied with, but I think that has a lot to do with what my expectations were going in. I also read 2 volumes of Children of the Whales. I read 6 and 7. Children of the Whales is a manga story that a manga series, I guess. I'm still getting used to like the language and the lingo around manga, so like if I'm a bit clumsy, bear with me. And I fell in love with it straight away. Still, like for this whole time, I've been saying that the characters, I think, are the weakest part of the story. I am really intrigued by where this story is heading. Like, there's just so much mystery. Basically, at the beginning of the series, we meet a group of people. There's about 500 people who live on what they call the Mud Whale, which is kind of like a drifting mud island. And basically they know that, you know, their community has been on this island for about 100 years, but they don't really know why, and they don't really know anything about the outside world, if there are other people. Like, they're very, very isolated, and they just don't know anything about their history going back more than about 100 years. There's also magic in this story. The people of the Mud Whale are kind of split up into 2 different groups. One are called the Marked, and basically they are people who possess thymia, or just a type of magic. So they have magical powers that are very kind of connected to their emotional state, and they die quite young, by the time they're about 30. And then the other group in the population are called the Unmarked, and they are people that do not have thymia or magic, but they live much longer. So it's just a story about these people, and in the first volume, basically what happens to kind of get the plot going is that they come across another island, and so all of a sudden their world and their understanding of the world is so much bigger. But along with that comes a lot of questions, and I really, really like it a lot. I think number 6 was perhaps the weakest so far, but 7 kind of kicked it back up, so I'm excited for 8. Now, How to Do Nothing is the first book I finished so far. I really, really liked this book. There were a few moments where the author kind of lost me as far as like her argument is concerned. Primarily that would be around her discussion of social media and Facebook. I just didn't feel like that was particularly strong. Personally, I really loved the kind of first chapter or so when the author was discussing the significance and the importance of parks and public spaces, because I love a good park, and just last year my local community, my local council, we won a really important battle to save our kind of one and only large park public space from privatization. So like that was just really near and dear to my heart, and kind of having it framed in a really specific way kind of taught me more about why I cared so much about that fight. Other exciting book news is I got a delivery. So because I was feeling a little bit like, I didn't know what I wanted to read, I was feeling some fiction, and in particular I was really craving some Australian fiction. And I recently joined a Facebook group, which is a Facebook group that reads Australian fiction. They do read other things, but like a lot of it is Australian fiction. So that was exciting. So I decided to pick up a few of the books that people were talking about. The first was White Girl by Toni Birch, which is a book that has been on my list for a long time. I'm really, really excited about this, and I think this might be my next fiction read. This is basically a story about the stolen generation of Aboriginal people. Basically, for those who don't know, the stolen generation, it should really be generations because it happened for like a long time. It was basically part of Australia's assimilation policy, where the idea stemmed from eugenics, basically, where theoretically, according to science, you could breed out Aboriginality within 3 generations. So that was part of the assimilation policy, and the stolen generation was an extension of that. And basically, children who were perhaps more light-skinned, that was often a target, but Aboriginal children were taken from their families. So a little bit of politics and history for you there, but basically this is a story about a white girl, so a lighter skinned Aboriginal girl. Then these two I don't really know much about, but everybody was talking about them in this group, so I bought them. So I got There Was Still Love by Fowell Perrett, and Boy Swallows Universe by Trent Bolton. And this one has won a lot of awards lately, so it's kind of a big deal. So I won't talk too much about these because I'm not sure when I'll be reading them, but I do really want to read White Girl this week. This was another book I ordered from the Sun Bookshop where we got Mum's Mother's Day present, and they sent another adorable little postcard. So fun. I am 90 pages in, and so far I quite like it. It's not as like intense and dark as I thought it would be. It's set in a fictional town somewhere in regional Australia in the 1960s, and Odette is kind of our main character, and she's the grandmother of Sissy, who is the lighter skinned Aboriginal girl in this story. But I will talk more with you about this book when I get to the end. And we're just not going to talk about this. This is just what happens when I go to bed with my hair wet. So last we spoke, I was reading White Girl by Toni Birch, and I have finished it. I finished it really, really quickly, actually. I really liked it overall. It was not really what I was expecting, though. And I want to be careful here because Toni Birch is an Aboriginal person and I am not. So I do not want to sound like I'm policing how a story about the stolen generation should be told at all. For me, this was a really beautiful story, and I loved the relationship between Odette, the grandmother, and Cecilia, or Sis, or Sissy, her granddaughter. To set up our story, basically Sissy's mother left when she was quite young, when she was a baby, and we don't know who the father was, but everyone kind of knows that he was probably a white man because Sissy is quite light-skinned. And at this point in time in Australia, the state is the legal guardian of Aboriginal children. They're also not seen as citizens at this point in time in Australia. So the fact that Sissy's mum is no longer around and that she's light-skinned kind of makes her a target for the policy at the time of removal of Aboriginal children. But basically the turning point of our book and what kind of gets the plot going is when a new police officer comes in and he's now in charge of the town. And he kind of does some quite intimidating things and says some things that makes it quite clear to Odette that Sissy, being the age of 12 or 13 in the book, that she is in danger of being taken away. And so the rest of the book is basically the choices Odette makes in an attempt to keep Sissy safe. Now, I'm trying to avoid like explicit spoilers, but so that I can talk about my thoughts and feelings, I'm going to discuss kind of vaguely like the general feeling of the book. And so I know I'm not going to tell you exactly how it ends, but I'm going to give you a general idea of the feeling of the ending, if that makes sense. So if you don't like that, skip forward a few minutes. So I think I just had different expectations going in as to like how dark and intense this story was going to be. And obviously it tackles some really difficult things. There's some really explicit examples of racial violence and like threatening and that sort of stuff in the book. I have seen some criticisms of people not liking this book for a couple of reasons. One is that the argument that sometimes it comes off, there is a word for it, but I don't know what it is, where it feels like the book is explaining to you as opposed to telling a story. And there were some passages where, maybe Odette was talking about you know, the stolen generation. She didn't use that language, but that's what she was talking about. And it definitely felt more like she was talking to us as the reader as opposed to talking to the person she was talking to, if that makes sense. I will say something that I think took away a little bit for me personally was just how awful Officer Lowe, this police officer that comes into their town, was. And obviously I'm not suggesting at all that police officers were not like that. There were many examples of police officers being this awful and worse. But I do sort of feel like, for me at least, just how awful he was made it easy to kind of slip into that idea that he was the problem. And yes, there were other issues, but ultimately he's the villain because he is such a strong antagonist. And obviously he was the individual that was persecuting Odette and Sissy, but he was just one cog in a much bigger system. Sometimes I feel like the story almost oversimplified that relationship, I guess. And perhaps that was the intention of Tony Birch, to kind of keep it simple and to really focus on the experience of Odette and Sissy. There were nuances introduced. For example, Odette meets other Aboriginal people who have kind of navigated the system in different ways. And I suppose going into this book, I was expecting it to be especially harrowing and to kind of impress upon me like how traumatic and tragic the stolen generation was and is. But I think instead, primarily what this book is it's a story of survival. I think my favorite part of this whole book though was just the relationship between Sissy and Odette. It's really beautiful and tender. So yeah, I really liked it. For me, it's a 3.5 out of 5-star reading. I bumped it up. I tend to round things up on GoodReads, so I gave it 4. To finish things up, I did read a couple more volumes of Manga just because they're so quick and easy. I read 8 and 9 of Children of the Whales. I think I've said all I can say mostly about the series without starting to give stuff away. I suppose the only thing I can add on to what I've already said is that some of the volumes, in particular, I think it was maybe 6 and a little bit 8 as well, some of them are just kind of quite confusing. There's a lot of different characters, a lot of different factions, like political stuff going on. I am still really liking the story though, and I'm still really interested to see where it's going. And the other manga that I read was just a one-shot. It's my lesbian experience with loneliness, and this is the true story of Nagata Kabi, I think her name is. And basically I'll read you the back, it sums it up quite nicely. 28 years old, no confidence, no direction, never had sex. The candid tell-all of a young woman's struggle with depression and sexuality that has taken the internet by storm. And basically we meet our main character right at the beginning of the book, about to have her first sexual encounter, and it is with a sex worker. And so then we kind of jump back and she tells us how she got to this point. And then we also learn what that experience is like and how it did and didn't meet her expectations and all of that. Apart from this being a story of sexuality and all of that, it is also, I think, primarily a story about identity and self-worth. So a lot of that self-worth, depression, anxiety stuff I definitely identified with. I will say a few trigger warnings for things like self-harm are discussed in this book, and suicidal ideation to a point too. Bits of it felt a little bit repetitive, but I didn't mind because it is quite short. And yeah, it was very warm and human and honest, brutally honest, and kind of a little bit funny sometimes too. So this was another 3.5-star read for me. So we have finally reached the end of this reading vlog. And of course, a big thank you to the sponsors of this and every video that I make, my patrons over on Patreon, and an especially big thank you goes to Tracy Timmerman, Laurie, Lynette Brown, The Hales K, and Biffy Rose. Thank you so much. And of course, thank you everybody who spent the time watching this video, hanging out with me. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and chat with me in the comments about all things books. Let me know what you're reading, and I will see you in the next one. Much love. Bye.